Hey guys, Oyster here, and welcome back to another video. So today, I have a ton of records, and I don't know what I'm doing with them. Actually, yeah, I do. This is a video that's inspired by a guy on YouTube, Canadian guy who goes by the Canadian Studmuffin. His name is Larry Graves, and a while back he put out a video that's my favorite video of his. It's called The Best Album of All Time, but it's not just talking about one album. It's talking about so many albums, because whenever you're listening to a great album, in that moment, it possibly becomes your favorite album of all time. In that moment, it is the greatest thing you've ever heard. And that's what I want to talk about, because Larry's a cool guy, and I want to do a thing because he made me do a thing. He didn't really make me do this. This is just fun. Anyways, music in the background is from David Bowie's album Low. So yeah, let's start the video. First album, Iron Maiden's first album. This was their album with Paul Di'Anno on vocals rather than Bruce Dickinson, who I like more. I like Paul Di'Anno more. But on this album, every single track is just great. There isn't a dull moment on it, and once the album starts up to once the album ends, it's just perfect. So yeah, easily the best album of all time. But so is Led Zeppelin 2. This copy isn't opened because my dad has a copy, and why would I open a thing when my dad has the same thing? Almost. This is the deluxe edition, my dad doesn't have that. Anyways, this is my favorite Led Zeppelin album. This is the only Zeppelin album that there isn't anything on it that this is the only one that I don't really have any complaints about, because on every other Led Zeppelin album it feels like there's a dip in quality at some point in the record, and this is the only one where I don't feel that. Easily the best album of all time. Next one is Pink Floyd's Metal. I'm not a big Pink Floyd fan. I only like a few of their albums, and at this point I own everything that I'd like to own from them, which is only 3 albums. But this album is just perfect. It really, from when it starts to when it ends, I don't have really anything bad to say about the album. Even the annoying parts where some people would start to complain about it, I have nothing bad to say. This is the best album of all time. Next up is Dio's first album, Holy Diver. Dio, without a doubt, is the greatest metal vocalist ever, and this is probably the best metal album of all time, because I don't consider Iron Maiden to be metal. Their first album I consider to be a little bit more punk, but Dio, definitely the best metal artist of all time, even though this is really his only amazing album. The rest are just kind of anywhere from good to great, but this one is really a perfect album and the best album of all time. Next up is Van Halen's first album. Van Halen is among my favorite bands ever, and this is my favorite album from them, so needless to say, I think it's flawless as an album. Yeah, just Eddie Van Halen on guitar, David Lee Roth just going crazy with vocals, Alex Van Halen on drums, and Michael Anthony on bass. Just amazing musicians, and best album of all time. Next one, Blue Oyster Cult's first album. First time I listened to this was with my dad, and we just got it from eBay, and we had listened to Fire of Unknown Origin, their 1981 album, before listening to this. And we got this in, and we listened to it, expecting it to be a little bit more like the later Fire of Unknown Origin, Blue Oyster Cult. And this is such a hard-rocking album, it's not even comparable to Fire of Unknown Origin. In this moment, whenever I'm listening to the first Blue Oyster Cult, It is the best album of all time, and I can't think about any other album. Next album, Boston's first album from 1976. From start to finish, it's amazing. There's really nothing to complain about. I'd like to complain about More Than Feeling being overplayed, but even that, I don't mind the song. I can listen to it. I love every track on here, and easily, best album of all time. Also, the cover art's beautiful. Fun thing in this stack, Dire Straits' Brothers in Arms, their 1985 album. Their really commercial album, but that didn't really take away from it. It's still their best album, and the greatest album ever, really. Mark Knopfler is one of the best guitarists ever, with a very unique picking style that makes it very difficult to play his music. But he has a very fun sound, and this album goes from anywhere from like really happy pop music to depressing and sad, which is a great musical diversity to have in just one album. It is a double album, but fitting that kind of musical diversity that just flows very well on one album is extremely difficult, to say the least, and easily the best album of all time. On to stack 2, the first Rush album. Easily my favorite studio album, if I really have to think about it. Just the best. There isn't a bad track on here. There isn't even just a good track on here. Everything is great or better. But if I'm just listening to it, every track is perfect. There's one track that used to not be so great in my eyes, but even that I've come to love. Easily the best album of all time. Number 2, 2112. This was the first Rush album I actively listened to. I believe it was over winter break, like a year and a half ago or something. And I listened to the entirety of the song 2112, which is the entire first side of the album. It is about 20 minutes, maybe a little bit less than that. But it is the greatest. 2112 as a song, as a 20-minute song, you can't get much better than that. I will get to that later on the video, though. And then every other track is just amazing. There's nothing else to say about this album except it's one of the best albums of all time. And whenever I'm listening to it, it is the best album of all time. Next up, Rush. Yeah, there is a thing on here, so Rush's Permanent Waves. The first 2 tracks on here are Rush classics, being Spirit of the Radio and Free Will. And then, Entre Nous, Jacob's Ladder, and Different Strings, not in that order, are also really good tracks, and it ends off the album with a 9-ish minute song called, what's it called? Natural Science, which I used to really hate, but now I've really grown used to it, and it's grown on me a lot, so yeah, definitely the best album of all time. Now, let's get all this Yes stuff from behind the pile, and talk about this. This is Yes's 1970 album, Time and a Word. A lot of people don't really like this album. A lot of people say that the first Yes album is better than this one. I could not disagree more. This is my 3rd favorite Yes studio album. Yeah, 3rd favorite. But whenever I'm listening to it, there isn't every single second of this album is perfect, and I wouldn't skip any of it. It is the best album of all time. The Yes album, my favorite Yes album, studio album at least, And, yeah. Yours is No Disgrace, The Clap by Steve Howe, Starship Trooper, I've Seen All Good People, which was my first Yes song I ever listened to. Maybe aside from Owner of a Lonely Heart, but that's not on this album, is it? Then, after I've Seen All Good People is A Venture, and it ends with, Perpetual Change. Yeah, there are a few seconds on this album that are like, okay, this is weird, but it brings up good musical diversity, which you don't get in many other albums, so it's easier to listen to the entire thing, because you're not just listening to one tone the entire time. It's so fun. Definitely the best album ever. Let me bring that back. There we go, and there you go. Next up, yes, Close to the Edge. This was an album given to me by a friend, and she's really cool, and yeah, thank you. She'll be watching this, probably. Anyways, Close to the Edge is my second favorite studio album by Yes. Yeah, the cover's kind of boring, and there are only 3 songs on it, but those 3 songs, you don't get much better than that in terms of Yes music. Really not... this song, or this album, doesn't have a boring song or a boring second on it. Every single moment of this album is perfection. So, best album of all time. When I'm listening to it. Yes songs, they're 1973, 1972? 1970 something. 72 or 73 live album, their first live album. There's a little bit of glare and you can see me, hello. But this is my favorite Yes album. Definitely in my top 10 albums of all time. Not just studio albums, because this isn't a studio album, but definitely top 10 albums of all time. This has all of Yes's greatest songs, but they're live, so there's some difference between these versions in the studio. And just amazingness the entire way through. There's some songs that aren't on any albums, such as Rick Wakeman's piece, Tales from the Six Wives of Henry VIII, which is from his solo effort. Unfortunately, though, this is the album where Yes's first drummer, Bill Bruford, left and Alan White came in. So, I don't like Alan White as much. I like Bill Bruford a little bit more as a drummer, but that doesn't matter when the music on here is still great. So, those are the first 3 stacks. And then, onto AC/DC. Let There Be Rock. Every single song on here is amazing, and it's AC/DC. I really don't have much else to say. Easily the best album of all time, if I haven't said that enough, and if you haven't gotten my point. I don't know if this side of the record's over, if so I'm going to need to cut the video for now. Just wait. Of course not. This side isn't over, it has another song after this one. So, Let There Be Rock by AC/DC has songs such as Let There Be Rock and my favorite AC/DC song, Whole Lotta Rosie. Just absolute perfection throughout the entire album. And also a really cool cover art. And just, yeah, AC/DC, Let There Be Rock, best album of all time. Let's throw you in there with the Rush stuff. There you go. Next up, AC/DC's Highway to Heck. Okay, it's Highway to Hell, but Highway to Heck is just more fun to say. There you have this very iconic cover photo, with Bon off to the side, Angus being a little devil kid, and Malcolm on the left, and the other 2, whatever. But, great album, my favorite AC/DC album. No, Back in Black is not on this list because I don't like Back in Black very much. It's good, but it's not the best album of all time, unlike Highway to Hell, which is the best album of all time. On to David Bowie, Low, the album that is playing right now, if you can take a listen. yeah. David Bowie's Low. The best album of all time when I'm just not thinking about anything and I just want to relax and listen to an album. This was an album that he apparently made when I think he was like trying to get off of cocaine, and he was just at a low point in his life. So all of the songs on here are apparently really depressing. I don't hear it. I love this album, and normally I'm not one for depressing music. So I don't know. This album's just perfect, honestly. The second side is full. The second side, if you can understand what I was saying, because I couldn't. The second side of this album is full of ambient, nice, relaxing music, with the final song on the album being called Subterraneans, and it's a beautiful song. Nothing on here, when I really think about it, is a perfect 10 for me, but if I'm just listening to it, this album is a perfect 10. Best album of all time. Now, aside from maybe Let's Dance, Bowie's most popular album, David Bowie's Ziggy Stardust, or as I like to say, as I like to call it, David Bowie's The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars, its full album title, which I love saying the entire thing, it's just so fun. This was the first David Bowie thing I listened to, because I was at school, and I was supposed to be working on a Photoshop thing, but I didn't do that, and I listened to music instead, and I wanted to listen to David Bowie for once. I listened to this, and was blown away by the quality of the music. David Bowie is known as one of the best artists of all time, and it's really sad that he passed away 2 years ago. But we still have his music to listen to, and it's... whenever you listen to his music, he's just alive again, and it's the best album of all time. It really captures everything that David Bowie was and is, even in his death. On to Triumph's first album, which I made a review for. You should go and watch that, it's nice. Self-promotion aside, Triumph is, when I'm listening to it, the best album of all time. The tracks on here are just so fun, so high energy, and I never get tired of listening to it. There isn't a boring song on the entire album. And yeah, cover art's kind of weird. I kind of like the 1995 In the Beginning cover a little bit more. The reissue cover, I think, or just the CD cover, whatever. But yeah, best album of all time. Now moving on to my favorite Triumph album, and actually my favorite cover of all time. My favorite album cover of all time. Look how cool that is! You can't tell me that that's not the coolest album cover you've ever seen. Anyways, my favorite Triumph album, Just a Game. The album cover is so cool, and the music on here isn't bad either. It is my favorite Triumph album. If I really have to think about it, and like, if you force me to say like my favorite Triumph album, this is it without a doubt. But all of them are great and amazing albums. It's just this one's slightly better. And I needed to cut the video again because this side of the record's over. Anyways, where was I? Triumph, Just a Game. Amazing album art, amazing music. Definitely the most fun for me to listen to. But still, with the other Triumph albums and everything else I've said so far, the best album of all time. Now, it fell. Whatever. The last album I have from Triumph over here, Allied Forces, their 5th album, and honestly, it's just as good as the other two. I wish that, like, I didn't have to think about it sometimes, like, which I like more, because I have thought about it, and honestly, Allied Forces and the first Triumph are tied exactly. I can't decide which I like more. This is just a great album, and every song on here is amazing. Even Magic Power, which I have gotten tired of, I can still listen to it, I can still enjoy it, and it is the best album of all time. And over here I have a few CDs, those being Metallica, Metal Lickers, and Megadeth. So, first of these is Metallica's Master of Puppets. This was, along with Rest in Peace, the first metal album I ever heard, because my dad played it in the car when I was 4. Yeah, and now I'm just a total metalhead, you know, like Brothers in Arms, so metal. No, but yeah, I enjoyed, oddly enough, I enjoyed Master of Puppets and Rest in Peace whenever my dad played them in the car on the way home from preschool. Good times. But Master of Puppets, just let's go to track listing. Battery, my favorite song on the album. Master of Puppets, my second favorite song on the album. Orion, my third favorite song on the album. Disposable Heroes, my fourth favorite song on the album, and everything else ties for fifth. This album is amazing, and it's just, I don't have words for it except for perfect. And honestly, for being one of the first 2 metal albums I ever heard, a great introduction to music, in my opinion. Best album of all time. Moving on to Megadeth, Rest in Peace. Like I said, it's the other album that got me into metal. Even though when I was 4, I would swear that I didn't like music at all. That's not true. I love this album. My favorite track has been, since I was 4, on this album, Rest in Peace. Or not Rest in Peace, but off of Rest in Peace. Five Magics. Five Magics, Holy Wars of Punishment Due, Hangar 18. Lucretia is awesome. Tornado of Souls is iconic. Rest in Peace, Plurus. This entire album is just perfection. When it comes down to it, this is the best album of all time. And that album art is so iconic. How did you not know who that is? It's Megadeth with their guy, I don't remember his name. Something. Anyways, Metallica and Justice for All. I really took my first really good listen to this album yesterday. Yeah, just keep singing, Bowie. Anyways, I really got into this album yesterday, and it is very easily in my top 25 albums of all time. I don't like it as much as this one. That's my favorite Metallica album. But this is a very close second. But if I'm just listening to it in its entirety and just letting the music flow through me, it is the best album of all time. It might be a little bit, like, I guess, cliche to say. I don't know if that's the right word. But it might be a little bit of an overrated song. That's probably the right thing. But One is my favorite song on the album, and when it starts up, when I was listening to it yesterday, like, I just got chills all through my body thinking about, like, the music and the song. And even though I'm not the kind of person to do this, I was thinking about the meaning of the song, and, like, war and death, and how it's not cool, bro. And, yeah, it just washed over me, and, it really hit me. It doesn't happen with me in music very often. But, yeah, Blackened and Justice for All, One, Harvester of Sorrow, Dyer's Eve, Frayed Ends of Sanity. Just absolutely amazing album. And all of these are the best albums of all time. But I have 3 over to my left that you might have seen when I was doing all of the random albums over there that were originally over there. Starting with these. You know what, Triumph, you're gonna have to move, sorry guys. These 3 albums are, in my opinion, the absolute best out of all of these. Even though all of these are the best albums of all time when I'm listening to them, These three albums are the best albums of all time when I'm not listening to them. Just off the top of my head, these are my three favorite albums of all time. And they're all live albums. The first and the weakest of the three, in my opinion, even though they're all 10 out of 10 albums, is Aerosmith Live, Bootleg. This is, yes, an official album by them. It was just created to be, like, in the style of a bootleg cover. There you get all the pictures. Anyways, early Aerosmith really never put out anything bad. This was the album where that kind of all changed, and their next album, Night in the Ruts, was good, but it didn't hold a candle to anything before it. This live album, every single track on here is so high energy, so great. Their cover of, what was it called? You know, that song from the Beatles. Why am I blanking on the name of the song? Come Together. That's the one. I'm just being stupid. But their cover of Come Together is my favorite version of Come Together. And Come Together by the Beatles is a 10 out of 10 song. It is one of their greatest. But I just think Aerosmith's energy to it that they add to it, that's the right thing to say. Aerosmith's energy in their version of the song is just remarkable. I don't say remarkable very much, do I? But, yeah, just amazing album. This video's going on for a while. Anyways, yeah, 10 out of 10 album. Not a song on here that's below a 10 out of 10. Next up, my second favorite album out of these three, AC/DC's If You Want Blood, You've Got It. Their live album from 1978, the year before Highway to Hell came out. Every song on here is a 10 out of 10. I can't say anything else about this album. Normally, when I'm listening to albums, even with the first Rush album, which I consider to be the best studio album of all time, it is not a 10 out of 10 album when I'm thinking about it. When I'm thinking about it, this album, and the one behind this, are all 10 out of 10s. Like, there's not a song on here that isn't just perfect in AC/DC's way. Every song on here is hard driving. Even the slow song on here, which is The Jack, off of High Voltage, their live version of The Jack, that is kind of slower, kind of less energy, but it's still a super high energy song, which I don't know how they managed to do that. AC/DC is just incredible, and this is the best album of all time. And now my absolute favorite album of all time, All the World's a Stage by Rush. Every single song on here is the best. Rush is my favorite band, and this is a double album. Does this open up? It doesn't open up. Well, I said it does and open up, and it sounded like it doesn't open up. Whatever. Their albums up until that point. Their first album, Fly By Night, Crest of Steel, in 2112. Two of which were already on this list. And there are some pictures. And every single song on here. It opens up with possibly the strongest opening track on anything I've ever heard. Bastille Day, with the guy saying, please welcome home Rush. Yeah. The best opening track of all time, in my opinion. And it ends with not the strongest closing track, but still a good encore closing track, which is their live version of What You're Doing. I think that if they ended with the actual closing track that was supposed to be on there, which was Working Man and Finding My Way, that would have been a much stronger closing track. But still, every single song on here is a 10 out of 10, so there's really no weaker song than anything else. It's just all of them are such high energy, and some just don't have the same energy. But every single song on here, 10 out of 10. It's like, I can't say anything different about this. There's Starman from 2112. There's Neil's somewhat small drum kit compared to everything else, and they're the amplifiers. But yeah, All the World is Stage is, in my opinion, the best album of all time. And it's not like the rest of these where I'm saying it like in the moment they're my favorite when I'm listening to them. This is my favorite album of all time, and I don't think that's gonna change. If it ever changes, it's gonna be a while. I don't think I'm gonna find anything else that dethrones this. But yeah, this was like a 30-ish minute video. I'm not sure because I cut the video a few times and it's only showing me the most recent shot. But yeah. I'm hoping the ambience kind of works well in the background, if you can even hear it. Hoping you can hear it. But yeah, the music in the background is David Bowie's Low. The inspiration for this video was from a video from Canadian Studmuffin. I will link Larry's channel in the description, and this is going to take a while to put back. But it was worth it, and I'll see you people in the next video that I do, whenever that'll be. Goodbye!